Welcome back to Infinite Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, and alongside me is the ever-curious Simon. Today we're diving deep into a meaty subject, the Patriot Act. Born in the aftermath of 9/11, it's been hailed as a shield for national security, but at what cost to our privacy? Let's get into it. Simon, this thing blankets us in surveillance. Is it more of a watchdog or Big Brother to you?
Big Brother vibes all the way, Joe. Having someone peek through my digital curtains doesn't scream protection to me. It's like trading your secret diary for a false sense of safety. Feels like they took "I always feel like somebody's watching me" and turned it into policy.
I hear you on the Big Brother front, Simon, but let's play devil's advocate. If it helps prevent even a single potential act of terror, wouldn't that be worth the trade? I'm not saying I want to toss all my freedoms out the window, but isn't some level of oversight a necessary evil in today's world?
Joe, here's the rub. Where do you draw that line? Sure, stopping a disaster is top priority, but if we get comfy with constant surveillance, what's next? Every text we send gets a read receipt by Uncle Sam. And guess what? Bad guys adapt, go old school, no tech. We're just fishing with dynamite in a digital pond while our privacy floats belly up. Not exactly my idea of a win-win situation.
The old read receipt from Uncle Sam, huh? I can see it now. Hey, Uncle Sam, did you enjoy my pizza order text last night? And there's more to it, right? Watch as those surveillance agents hit up bingo halls because, that's where the real shady deals go down when terrorists ditch the tech. The Patriot Act probably wasn't aiming to become the grandma of all eavesdroppers.
Bingo halls, the new spy dens. But seriously, think about it. The Patriot Act's like a giant net. You catch some big fish, sure, but all these minnows, aka regular folks, get swept up too. You and I both know that data's ripe for misuse or slip-ups. How many times do we hear about leaks and hacks? It's not just about intent, Joe. It's the aftermath we gotta worry about with such a broad sweep.
Leaks and hacks, I can't argue that. It's a digital jungle out there, and it seems like every other week some database is getting ripped off. My worry? Function creep. The Patriot Act starts with lofty goals, stop terrorists. But then, slowly, the net cast gets wider. Next thing you know, downloading a cat video could land you on a watch list. We've got to ask whether the safety we're promised is truly delivered, or if we're just selling our privacy for the illusion of it.
Absolutely, Joe. The illusion of safety, that's spot on. Let's say you download that cat video and boom, you're flagged as a person of interest. Sounds absurd, right? But what if it's not? Our info is like trail mix for agencies under the Patriot Act. Even when nothing's fishy, you could still get nibbled on. And let's face it, if I wanted a shadow to follow me all day, I'd buy one of those creepy life-sized cardboard cutouts of myself.
Cardboard cutouts. Maybe that's the solution, Simon. Start a business selling personal cardboard shadows, guaranteed not to snoop on your texts or emails. Plus, they won't hack into anything except maybe tripping people up at home. The Patriot Act might keep tabs on us, but at least our cardboard twins will only be guilty of scaring the pizza delivery guy.
Got any room on your front porch for one of those cardboard twins, Joe? Or would it be too busy keeping the nosy neighbors at bay while you're out saving the world one podcast at a time?
Haha, no room on the porch, Simon. But here's what's squeezing us more: the sneak and peek searches allowed by the Patriot Act. Law enforcement can search a suspected individual's property without immediate notification. Meant for catching terrorists unsuspected, but this could give way to misuse in less clear-cut situations. It's not just about nosy neighbors. It's more like having invisible ones with a master key to your life.
Oh man, you're telling me there's a bunch of ninja cops tiptoeing around my stuff and I won't know till Christmas? That's like having a secret Santa who doesn't leave presents, just takes your privacy. Give me a heads up, at least drop a note. Hey, dropped by to check your cereal box for secrets. P.S. You're out of milk.
Right? It's the kind of surprise nobody wants, like finding a raisin cookie when you expected chocolate chip. But let's flip it over. If these Secret Santa agents actually foil a sinister plot thanks to their sneak and peek, could we stomach it then? What if they find something critical tucked in that cereal box? Sure, I'm protective of my cornflakes and privacy, but if there's a chance to stop real threats, maybe some milk's worth spilling.
You've got a point, Joe. It's a tough cookie to swallow. See what I did there? Raisins or not. The thought of these agents stopping something truly terrifying does hit home. Safety matters. Nobody wants danger at their doorstep. I guess if the sneak and peek is the difference between peace of mind and chaos, maybe it's not all bad. I just want strict rules so that power isn't abused. Because let's face it, knowing my cornflakes are safe is one thing, but feeling like my privacy's respected, that's the real prize in the cereal box.
Definitely, Simon. So speaking of power not getting abused, what kind of strict rules would you put in place to keep our proverbial cereal box not just safe, but private? How do we keep those sneaky Santas in check?
Well, first off, clear-cut guidelines. Who can authorize these searches, and what justifies them? There must be concrete evidence, not just hunches. Strict oversight to keep tabs on the tab keepers. Accountability is key. Someone steps out of line, they face the music. And transparency. Let the public know how often sneak and peek actually prevents a disaster. That way, it's not some shadowy doings. There's daylight on the process. No dark arts or cloak and dagger stuff with my Fruit Loops. Thanks.
You know what this reminds me of, Simon? Back in college, I had this roommate. Let's call him Dave. He was a bit of an overprotective guy, especially when it came to our shared apartment. One day, I come home, and Dave's installed these fancy locks on every door, closet, fridge, even the bathroom. So here's the kicker. One night, I stumble out of bed, half asleep, desperate for the bathroom. But guess what? The new lock is a puzzle worthy of a spy movie, and I can't crack it. Long story short, it didn't end well for my dignity or Dave's carpet. Dave had good intentions, wanted to keep our stuff safe, but his system lacked balance, a clear lack of practical guidelines. Plus, actual communication about how those locks worked would have been nice. Key ID business, I'd say.
Dave's Lock Labyrinth. Classic overkill. It's like the Patriot Act post 9/11. We're all for dodging danger, but let's not turn our homes into Fort Knox with no clue how to work the security system, right? If we're putting up defenses like complex laws and surveillance that might trip us up more than the bad guys, maybe it's time to reassess. Protection shouldn't mean you need an escape artist's skills just to grab a midnight snack. Or in your case, avoid a carpet crisis.
After 9/11, the U.S. Congress rushed to pass the Patriot Act with the intent of strengthening national security. It expands law enforcement's ability to surveil phone and email communications, collect bank and credit reporting records, and track the activity of suspected terrorists. The controversy really stems from parts like Section 215, which authorizes the collection of any tangible things for an investigation to protect against terrorism. That's broad, right? I mean, it allowed for the bulk collection of telephone metadata by the NSA, a program revealed by Edward Snowden in 2013. And while there are checks like the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, FISC, some argue it's essentially a rubber stamp because it's rare that they deny requests. Now, these measures may have helped prevent attacks. Reports say over 50 potential terrorist events were thwarted by surveillance programs. But the line between safety and privacy is being tightrope walked here. You gotta weigh it. Are we okay with potentially invasive laws if they can stop disasters, even if it means occasionally treating every citizen as a suspect? Transparency reports and oversight are better nowadays, but questions about efficacy and ethical practice remain. Balance is tough, but essential in this arena.
Whoa, any tangible things. Hey Joe, next thing you know, they'll be after my beloved rubber ducky in the name of national security. He's seen too much in that bathtub.
Yeah, Simon, your rubber ducky might be drafted into the Secret Service. But seriously, imagine if every item in our homes could be tagged as evidence. That's not protection. It feels more like an open house where Uncle Sam's the only guest. Sure, they're hunting for needles in haystacks to keep us safe, but at what point do we say, hey, that's my haystack you're digging through? We need safety, no doubt. Yet, there's something unsettling about a security blanket that can turn into a straitjacket.
Uncle Sam's open house, you say? I bet he'd find my collection of novelty fridge magnets magnetic for national security. But honestly, Do we want a peeping Tom or a guardian angel? Because it feels like the Patriot Act turned Uncle Sam into the nosiest neighbor on the block, with X-ray glasses to boot.
Hey, fresh listeners. You've jumped into a spicy chat about the Patriot Act post 9/11. Basically, it's the debate of protection versus intrusion. Simon and I have been riffing on whether this act is Uncle Sam being a guardian angel or a peeping Tom. The gist? We're all for dodging danger, but let's not toss out privacy with the bathwater, or rubber ducky, as Simon would say. Does this get us safer streets or just less private cereal bowls? Still a hot potato after all these years.
My rubber ducky aside, this act really morphs the definition of private property. You've got government agencies that can poke around in your life with just a hint of suspicion. Sure, we want them to catch the bad folks, but who's watching the watchers? Here's the rub. There's still no clear proof that collecting all this data from everyone is key to stopping baddies. We need a tighter focus on actual threats, not treating every Joe and Simon like suspects, especially when it's about our phone chit-chat or my midnight snack habits.
Absolutely. The balance between liberty and security is a tough one. Sure, we want the net to catch sharks, not just scoop up all the fish in the sea. Government surveillance is a tool that needs precision, or else it's just a sledgehammer where we'd need a scalpel. So listeners, what's your take on this? How do we fine-tune this act without turning into a nation of suspects? Let's keep this critical conversation going.
You know, Joe, our chat about the Patriot Act and balancing safety with personal freedom, it has echoes of a darker chapter in America's story, World War II's Japanese-American internment camps. Back then, fear and suspicion led to thousands of citizens losing their rights, all sanctioned by the government, citing national security. It's one of those times where, looking back, it's clear how the scales tipped way too far away from individual rights. We've got to crack open that history book and make sure we don't repeat those mistakes. So how do we hold on to our values when the pressure's on?
Yeah, internment camps. Talk about a cautionary tale. It took decades for the U.S. government to officially apologize for that injustice. It's a stark reminder of how fear can lead to drastic actions with devastating effects. The real kicker? Those camps were later acknowledged as results of race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. So we have to ask ourselves, in times of crisis, do we give in to fear or hold tightly to our principles? And hey, folks listening in, question for you. What would you consider a reasonable limit on freedoms during a national emergency? Because if history's taught us anything, it's easier to cross lines in the sand when the tide of fear is rising.
Wait, you're telling me the U.S. actually rounded up its own citizens? Like, just because of their heritage, regardless if they'd done anything wrong? That's messed up on so many levels. Imagine kicking back at home and suddenly, bam, you're tagged as the enemy. No trial, no nothing. Just because you look like the nation we're fighting? Man, that's a scary thought. What if one day it's because of your podcast history or something silly like wearing socks with sandals? Where does it end, right?
Absolutely, it was a grave misstep. Uprooting citizens with the stroke of an executive order just shows how fear can twist logic. It wasn't about actual threats, it was prejudice masquerading as precaution. And sure, if today we started profiling people based on podcasts or bad fashion choices, well, anyone could be next. History demands we ask hard questions. Who are we as a society? What do we value? If we don't learn from the past, we might just find ourselves on a slippery slope that leads right back to those same dark places.
You hit it, Joe. History's like a grim GPS. It shows where we've gone wrong so we don't reroute back there. Preserving our core values is key, lest we forget and repeat the darkest parts of our past.
Spot on. History's meant to teach us, not for a replay. Keeping our moral compass during a storm is what truly tests our society's mettle.
Right, and that moral compass thing gets real shaky when fear's the captain of the ship. Those internment camps weren't just a hiccup. They were full-blown violations of civil liberties. Japanese Americans lost their homes, businesses, and basic rights, all without due process, basically guilty until proven innocent. And it took decades for the US to recognize that misstep with a formal apology and reparations. Just shows that even a nation striving for justice can falter majorly thanks to fear and prejudice. So we gotta stay woke.
Absolutely, staying woke is just the beginning. I mean, imagine being judged solely on your ethnicity or where your grandparents came from. Internment camps scream a lesson loud and clear. Fear should never bulldoze our rights. Look, a government apology means squat if there's no real change in action. Every generation needs to push back against that guilty by association mindset. So let's throw this out to you all. Where do we draw the line today? How vigilant are we willing to be to ensure our rights aren't trampled when the next crisis hits?
Man, Joe, that's the million-dollar question. How do we stop fear from taking the driver's seat in policymaking while still protecting ourselves? Where is that line between safety and liberty supposed to be anyway?
It's a gnarly tightrope walk, isn't it? You want to keep danger at bay, but not by tossing liberties out of the window. To find that line, we need open debate, clear heads, and maybe most importantly, a solid grasp on the Constitution. It's there for exactly these times, to remind us what we stand for, no matter how rough it gets. And the moment we forget that, we risk tipping into territory we might not come back from so easily.
Totally. That Constitution is like the rule book for our national game. It spells out what's fair and what's foul, even when things get wild. During World War II, the internment camps, man, they were such a foul play. They trampled on the very foundations of freedom, equality before the law, protection against unlawful detention. Heck, the pursuit of happiness got locked up too. The takeaway? Our laws and leaders have to champion these rights, relentlessly, so no one gets sidelined just because of their heritage or some fear-fueled suspicion.
Completely. Look, the internment camps weren't just spots on a map. They were prisons without bars for 120,000 individuals of Japanese descent, two-thirds American citizens, no less. The real tragedy? These were folks depicted as potential traitors with zero evidence. We had loyal Americans forced into these camps because the country they pledged allegiance to doubted them when it mattered most. If our laws and leaders can't protect us from that kind of suspicion without just cause, if those foundations crack under pressure, then we're all in danger whenever the political winds shift. It's not just about past errors, it's a present caution against speedy judgments made in fear's shadow.
I mean, picture it, Joe. 120,000 people. That's like packing up a whole mid-sized city. Because what? Their faces reminded someone of the enemy. And these were normal folks. Teachers, farmers, store owners, you name it. Just booted out based on who their grandparents were. The real stab is most were as American as apple pie. Imagine missing your senior prom or selling your business for pennies because suddenly you're the risk. You think they got a fair shake? Not a chance. How do we ensure our society's not slicing off pieces of itself next time panic hits the fan?
Heavy stuff, Simon. It gives you chills thinking about so many lives turned upside down. So if we take a page from that chapter, how do we write a future where due process isn't just tossed aside? How can we bake fairness and justice into our responses even when facing genuine threats?
Joe, we need to stick to the recipe of due process no matter what. If we suspect a threat, fine, but let's serve up justice properly. Individual assessment, evidence, trials when needed. No blanket judgments based on background or looks. Keep that Constitution close, because it's got the ingredients for protecting our rights even when the kitchen gets hot. And never skip out on a full serving of civil liberties, no matter who's knocking at the door.
While keeping security tight is crucial, we've got to be wary of measures like no-fly lists turning Kafkaesque. I mean, people have landed on these lists by mistake, with little to no explanation or clear path to get off. It's a system that sometimes sweeps up innocent folks alongside actual threats due to clerical errors or guilt by vague association. Yes, vigilance is necessary, but should come with transparency and fairness. Without it, we get a different kind of nightmare. People trapped in a bureaucratic maze, guilty until proven innocent, ring any historical bells. We should demand accountability alongside safety. Otherwise, the cost to personal freedom is just too high.
Absolutely, Joe. These no-fly lists can turn into real-life nightmares. trapping folks in a web that they didn't even know they were stuck in. It's like history's giving us a pop quiz to see if we learned anything at all. Internment Camps 101. Did we pass, or are we heading for summer school? We've got to pay attention, because those who don't know history are destined to, well, you know. How do we make sure these lessons stick this time?
Definitely, Simon. Speaking of lessons in history's pop quizzes, I've heard some bizarre stories that make you wonder if we're not already in summer school. Take no-fly lists, designed to keep us safe in the skies but sometimes trap innocent people instead. Ever hear about the toddler who was flagged? You can't help but snort at the absurdity. Yet, it's no laughing matter when you're the one missing flights and job opportunities over some clerical snafu. Definitely Kafkaesque. But then again, tight airport controls have quashed real threats too. It's a balancing act between security success stories and ensuring John Doe isn't marked as John Doe.
Honestly, Joe, a tot being flagged? That's like thinking the boogeyman's under your bed. Cute in a movie, not so much at airport security. You'd think someone would double-check before grounding a kid's teddy bear. But let's not forget, while we chuckle at these blunders, that for every laughable mix-up, there's probably a dozen stories we never hear. The successes where tight security nabbed a bad guy before takeoff. Sure, we need a magnifying glass on those lists to cut the Kafkaesque nonsense, but let's not toss out the airline safety baby with the bureaucratic bathwater. It's a crazy juggle, man. How do we keep Johnny Innocent flying and Johnny Bad News grounded?
No kidding. It's wild to think about. It punches you right in the gut. On one hand, you've got a little kid who can't even spell security threat getting the 3rd degree. It's laughable until it happens to you or someone you know. Then it's not just a story. It plunges real lives into chaos. Gets me fired up thinking about these innocent people dealing with this nightmare. But then we can't just ignore the success stories, lives potentially saved because of vigilant security checks. It's that emotional tug of war, right? Balancing justified fears against those Kafkaesque screw-ups. I'm all for safety, but man, there's got to be room for common sense and compassion so Johnny Innocent isn't treated like public enemy number one.
Joe, let's toss a flashlight on those facts. The no-fly list, part of the U.S. government's terrorist screening database, has over 1 million names. Created post 9/11 to keep the skies safe, it's had some wins, like stopping folks tied to terrorist plots. But with that many names, errors happen. People with similar or same names as suspects get snagged, causing ridiculous hassles. Even Senator Ted Kennedy once got delayed. Plus, there's zero transparency on how you land on it or how to clear your name. And the process to appeal? It's like trying to win a carnival game blindfolded. Possible, sorta, but expect a lot of fumbling around. We're in an age where toddlers and politicians make the same list. That's when you know bureaucracy's hit peak weirdness. Strong safeguards are vital, but let's sharpen that tool so we're carving the right turkeys for Thanksgiving, you know?
Wild, man. 1 million names? That's casting a net wider than any ocean. Think about it. Getting flagged because your name matches a bad actor's. It's like being punished for someone else eating the last cookie when you weren't even in the house. Even Ted Kennedy got tripped up. Shows how this thing cuts across all walks of life. The appeal process is like spinning the wheel of fortune, but all the prizes are just different shades of hassle. We definitely need the ability to spot real threats, no arguments there. But truth is, we gotta streamline this thing, make it smart, not just big and unwieldy. Let's be efficient, effective, not just bureaucratic black holes sucking regular folks into an abyss of red tape.
I'll tell you what, Joe. Give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Give a toddler a spot on the no-fly list, and we've got enough material to keep our podcast running till the cows come home. Let's toss the net smarter, not wider, huh?
Spot on, Simon. Dishing out spots on the list like Halloween candy isn't going to cut it. What about adding a pinch of precision? Maybe a focused criteria for who really poses a risk. The key is specificity. Like in cooking, you can't just toss in a bit of everything and expect a Michelin star meal. It's the same with screening. We need clear rules and pinpoint accuracy to tell apart a troublemaker from a toddler. And let's not forget due process. When someone gets that scarlet letter N for no fly, there needs to be a fast, fair way to peel it off if it's a mistake. Otherwise, we're all just one typo away from being grounded.
Joe, let's drill down. The no-fly list, it's supposed to be a scalpel, precise, cutting out the real danger. Instead, it's become more like a blunt hatchet, indiscriminate, cleaving through people's lives. We've got babies and grandmas getting stopped, and good luck clearing your name. Appeals are a labyrinth with no map. Due process is as rare as a unicorn at these altitudes. That said, we know it's there for good reason. We can't just swing open the cockpit doors. But here's the deal. If due process isn't the co-pilot in this ride, we end up on a one-way trip to Crazy Town. It's not about scrapping the list, but fixing the engine so it runs clean, robust checks, real-time updates, and a fair shot at getting off that list. Let's fly safe, sure, but let's also fly smart.
Here's the twist, Simon. We're talking about a scalpel versus hatchet situation, but even that doesn't cut it. What we need is a full diagnostic tool, one that's smart enough to differentiate between a real threat and an unlucky doppelganger. We've got databases more sophisticated than ever before, so why does it feel like we're stuck with dial-up security in a fiber-optic world? It's not just Kafkaesque. It's like using a map from the 50s to navigate today's roads. Sure, the list has thwarted bad actors, no question there, but how many false positives are we willing to accept? It's time to upgrade the system. Tech-enhanced checks, transparent processes, maybe even an AI touch. Let's not toss the baby out with the bathwater. Instead, let's change the water. Let the good folks fly without fear of being caught up in this dragnet while still keeping those cockpit doors as secure as Fort Knox. That's not Crazy Town. That's common sense town, right?
Absolutely, Joe. We're deep in the weeds talking high-tech tools and AI, like we're casting some magical spell to weed out the baddies. But hey, maybe that's not so far-fetched. The future could be one login away from a security revamp. We get smarter lists, smaller nets, but same strong doors. Now, while we keep stirring that pot of ideas, I wonder what other lists are out there catching more flies than villains? Or better yet, how many hoops do regular Joes have to jump through before someone realizes Joe ain't no villain? That's a rabbit hole worth a headlamp or two, don't you think?
Chasing down a less invasive security future feels like hunting Bigfoot sometimes, doesn't it? But let's pivot for a second and turn the spotlight on another scene at airports that would make even Bigfoot do a double take: full body scans. These high-tech peep shows can see you almost in the buff. And if the machine gets stage fright, next up is a pat-down performance worthy of a Broadway show. Let's have fun with this. Imagine the different folks lining up for their TSA solos.
Hey folks, just tuning in, we're riffing on the airport security dance, those full-body scans that peek under your clothes and the pat-downs if you beep. Imagine going through it all. Some are chill as cucumbers, others act like they've seen a ghost. It's a real TSA talent show out here. But seriously, while we crack jokes, these scanners stir up big privacy tiffs. Are we trading our dignity for safety, or is this X-ray Vision Act keeping us secure? Stick around. We're diving into the deep end of this controversy with more laughs and some serious talk too.
Right. Let's frame this picture. You step into the scanner, hands up like you're on a roller coaster, but instead of a thrill, it's your invisible birthday suit on display. Then, picture this. You choose the pat-down instead. There you are, getting more personal attention than your last date, all because you left a penny in your pocket. But peel back the curtain of comedy and there's a serious side to this show. It's a tech tug-of-war between keeping flights safe and feeling like your privacy's been sent through the shredder. These scanners, they're not just fancy metal detectors. They strip down your secrets without a striptease. So where should we draw the line? Safety's key, but at what cost to our personal dignity? That's no laughing matter.
Well, Joe, walking through those scanners, I kind of feel like I'm on a dating app for TSA agents. Swipe right for good airport behavior, swipe left if you forgot to take off your belt. But instead of getting a drink, you might get a free pat-down. Now that's what I call exclusive membership perks.
Laugh it off we can, Simon, but consider this. Some folks aren't just walking away with a funny story. There's serious beef with those scans. They aren't just picking out the metal in your jeans. We're talking privacy here. Seen as a virtual strip search by many, these scanners lift the veil on what most would keep under wraps. They've sparked privacy lawsuits and pose ethical questions like whether safety should overshadow personal rights. Yes, they nab weapons and explosives hidden under clothes, a huge win for public safety, but not everyone's sold on being virtually unclothed for security's sake. Do we need such invasive tech to feel safe in the skies? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Joe, I get the safety spiel. These scanners are like superpowers for spotting danger. But don't you think it's a bit of overkill? Like swatting a fly with a sledgehammer? Sure, they can see your nifty tattoo in places the sun don't shine, but do we really need Big Brother's X-ray specs to tell us if that dude's hiding a water bottle? And let's talk about dignity. It's like being naked at a doctor's office, except here you got zero patient confidentiality. I'm all for dodging disasters in the air, but hey, maybe let's find a middle ground where I keep my clothes on and my secrets. Well, secret.
Simon, you nailed it. It's like swatting a fly with a wrecking ball. We're talking scans that could double as audition tapes for a skin-tight superhero suit. And sure, they're hunting for more than water bottles. They're after the real menacing stuff. But is it an overkill? Pretty much feels like using a chainsaw to carve your Thanksgiving turkey. Now let's talk brass tacks about dignity and privacy. What's it worth in the golden age of technology? Here you are, stripped of secrets without shedding a thread, while somewhere a screen shows all. This isn't just about stashing away half-used shampoo. It's about a world where your bare essentials are on display without your say-so. We want to ride the skies without fear of falling. I get that. Yet there's got to be a smarter way, a less invasive means of sniffing out threats that doesn't involve seeing everyone in their birthday suits. Otherwise, what's next? Full memory scans before boarding? That turbo thrust into the future might keep the skies safe, but at what cost? Remember, today's scans could set tomorrow's standards.
You know, Joe, it's wild. We've got technology to get a latte ordered from space, practically, but still combating threats with tech that turns us naked as mole rats. If only we could invest in security that doesn't leave us feeling exposed in more ways than one. It makes you wonder, what if our future includes discrete scanners that respect our privacy instead of stripping it away? That's the ticket.
Simon, like you were saying, we're in an age where privacy's as endangered as the dodo, which slides us right into this giant digital sea we're all swimming in, our data. Every click, every like, every purchase. The breadcrumbs we scatter across the web are gobbled up faster than breadcrumbs at a pigeon party. And here's where it gets sticky. Who really owns that trail of digital crumbs? We're not just talking emails and texts, but the whole shebang. Your online persona, your preferences, habits, all scooped up and often traded like baseball cards without you seeing a dime or even understanding the game that's being played with your info. Ethics in this big data harvest? It's like trying to find a needle in a data stack. How do businesses navigate this without skidding off the moral compass? Should users get more say over their own digital footprints? These questions aren't just hypothetical. They're as real as the phone in your pocket. Let's dive in.
So, Joe, this one time, I'm at this flea market, right? Just minding my own, looking for some vinyls. And there's this guy. He sells these old school cameras, beautiful stuff. Tells me they're just like new, pristine condition. So I buy one, feeling pretty jazzed about it. Get home, and guess what? I find an old roll of film inside. Now, I'm curious but also feeling kinda iffy about developing someone else's memories. But curiosity wins, so I get them developed, and bam! There's this family's whole vacation, smiling at landmarks, goofy diner stops, the works. It felt invasive, like I'd accidentally read their diary. Here's the kicker. That film, those pictures, they're kinda like our data. We forget we're leaving it in places, not realizing someone might take a peek into our lives. This camera guy, he didn't mean harm, and neither do online shoppers, but in both cases, someone's personal stuff got passed on without consent. Makes you think, huh?
Imagine that, Simon, stumbling upon strangers' snapshots. It's wild, right? Like pocket dialing someone and blabbing secrets you didn't even know you had. Now scale that up to the internet size. It's not just a roll of film. It's our entire lives getting developed by anyone savvy enough to open the back of the camera. And the worst part? Most folks don't even know they've left their film behind. They're in for some surprises.
Name's Simon, not Cindy, but I've sure got enough personal data swimming around out there to fill a glass slipper. Or 20. They say curiosity killed the cat. Well, in the digital world, it feels like privacy's got 9 lives, and 8 of them are already toast.
Funny story, actually. So a couple of years back, I downloaded this new app for organizing my day. Productivity through the roof, right? I'm inputting tasks, meetings, jotting down notes. It even had this feature where you could tag locations for errands. A couple of months later, ads start popping up. Not just any ads. The exact guitar I drooled over at a local shop, the coffee brand I buy, trips to places I've tagged in the app. It's like they knew me better than I knew myself. Got me thinking. Every detail was a gem for their data mining operation. I thought I was just streamlining my schedule. Turns out I volunteered for a 24/7 commercial audition without realizing it. Sneaky, huh? That app taught me a valuable lesson about reading the fine print and considering the true cost of free services.
Sneaky? That's one word for it, Joe. I'd say downright creepy, like the app turned into a mind-reading stalker, but with terms and conditions instead of binoculars. Isn't it bonkers how free apps are like cheese in a mousetrap? Sure, they organize your day, but they're also organizing a whole profile on you for advertisers. And here's what gets my goat. You're giving up nuggets of your life, thinking it's all good in the privacy hood, and then bam, you're the product. It's like signing up for guitar lessons and suddenly finding yourself on stage at a rock concert without knowing how to play a chord. It's high time users get the heads up, or better yet, a cut of the action when their data gets passed around.
Oh man, that hits hard. Like you think you're getting this sweet deal, nifty tools to simplify life, and next thing you know, you're an unwitting star of your own Truman Show for advertisers. Talk about the digital double cross. Think about it. You sign up, accept those terms, who really reads them, right? And just like that, your personal data is fair game. But why shouldn't we have a say in who's cashing in on our clicks and coffee shop check-ins? It's high time to turn the tables. Let's push for transparency, for control over our online breadcrumbs. It's about taking the narrative back, making sure that when data's being traded like stocks, the folks it's about, us, get a seat at the table, or at least a look at the menu.
Exactly, Joe. Seems like we're just calves being fattened up on the free pasture of the internet, then auctioned off when we're all plump with data. We're part of this huge feast and don't even know what's being served. It's not just about ads for guitars or coffee. It's our choices that are getting packaged and sold in ways we can't trace. Isn't it time we get to choose if our digital selves get put on the market? Maybe even get a slice of the pie when they do? How about some real control, where I click yes and mean it because I know exactly where my data's heading? Now that'd be real transparency, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Transparency is key. We're not just talking a peek behind the curtain. We want backstage passes to the whole show of our data's journey. Every term, every policy update should be as clear as crystal, and it's about choice, real informed consent. Do I agree to let my digital double roam free for business gains? If so, how far does it wander, and who gets to greet it? But here's the kicker. What if there was a system where users could leverage their own data, where consent comes with perks beyond access to services, maybe even monetary gain or enhanced privacy controls? That shifts the dynamic, puts some power back in our hands, right where it belongs. This isn't just idle talk. Some companies are already exploring these models, offering more transparent trade-offs for user information. Now, that's what progress could look like.
Spot on, Joe. There's this buzzing concept now, data dividends. We're talking getting a slice of the profits companies make selling our data. Then there's data marketplaces. You control who buys your info and what they can see. Feels a bit like you're the boss of a tiny stock market, but instead of stocks, it's your movie likes and shopping fails. Think about it. Normalizing user compensation would shake up the whole scene. It introduces ethical sharing, because if you're trading something valuable, your data, shouldn't you know its worth? That transparency turns us from clueless bystanders to savvy stakeholders in the grand scheme of clicks and keyboards.
Data dividends, data marketplaces. Sure sounds like utopia for our digital selves, but pause and press rewind. Let's not get dazzled by the dollar signs just yet. We're essentially putting a price tag on our privacy. Doesn't that feel icky to anyone else? We gotta ask, do we really want to commodify our personal lives? Today you're getting paid for your movie preferences. Tomorrow, what's up for grabs? Health info, location data. This opens a can of worms about consent and value. What are the actual consequences of turning every aspect of our digital footprints into tradable commodities? Could lead to new forms of exploitation. Imagine being lowballed for your data because you didn't know better. Sure, being savvy stakeholders sounds amazing, but without understanding the whole game board, it could be more gamble than gain. This is about ethics, not just earnings. It's about ensuring our online presence isn't reduced to just another asset breed in the digital stockyard. That's the real talk we need to have.
Chew on this, Joe. Maybe it's high time we start a data diet. Tighten up what we share and when. Make those data-hungry businesses work up an appetite.
A data diet, love the term. We're binging on apps and services, spoon-feeding them every detail of our lives with a silver ladle. But should we start fasting or just get pickier with our digital meals? It starts with choosing where you dine. Not every platform deserves a seat at your table. And it's about being mindful, knowing the ingredients in your online interactions. That means checking those privacy settings like nutrition labels. What am I sharing? Who's it going to? Cut back on unnecessary oversharing, for sure. The question is, can the average user stick to this data diet without getting starved out of convenience? There's a balance somewhere, but staying on that tightrope takes serious digital discipline. It shouldn't just be on users. The whole ecosystem needs a change in diet, not just the consumers, but also the platforms. They all need healthier habits when it comes to personal data.
I hear you on the balanced diet, Joe. All I'm saying is, our digital well-being needs as much attention as we give those juice cleanses and zero-carb fads. We need to get companies on board with this data nutrition too. Transparency on what they collect, clarity on how it's used, and respect for users as partners, not just sources. It's all a part of crafting a healthier digital ecosystem where ethics aren't just garnish, but the main course. How can businesses step up their game to keep our data off the black market buffet?
You hit the nail on the head there, Simon. Speaking of ethics as the main course, it reminds me of a different kind of history lesson. Let's call it Silicon Sleuths. Looking back, tech giants have been playing fast and loose with privacy for years. Remember when Search Engine X started tailoring ads using our search histories? Or Social Network Y's infamous data leaks? These incidents sparked a real awakening among users and regulators. Laws like GDPR and CCPA emerged as answers to these overreaches, setting up new ground rules for digital play. People are more alert now, raising their voices whenever privacy gets shoved in the bargain bin. It's like we've witnessed digital evolution in real time. User naivety, corporate intrusions, legislative pushback, a real cyclical dance of privacy politics. How far have we really come, though? Are we better off today, or just caught in a loop? Let's sift through some history and chat about where this might be headed.
Totally, Joe. With all these privacy shenanigans from tech titans, it's like we're stuck in a game of whack-a-mole. They slip up, we slam down with laws. But are folks actually feeling safer online with GDPR and CCPA, or is it just another set of acronyms to ignore while hitting accept on pop-ups?
It's a tough call, Simon. Sure, GDPR and CCPA were landmark moments, but it's the continuous cycle of breach and patch that's got folks skeptical. Look back at the early 2000s. Data was the Wild West, tech bigwigs mining without many rules. Then came real wake-up calls, breaches like the Social Network Y fiasco 2018, where personal data was mishandled, swinging the spotlight onto lacking privacy safeguards. These episodes prompted user outrage and pushed for tighter regulations. Fast forward to Europe's GDPR in 2018, set to hand control back to users. Consent must be clear, breaches notified within 72 hours, hefty fines dangling over companies' heads. On the US front, California spearheaded with CCPA in 2020, echoing some of GDPR's spirit, but with local flavors. For instance, granting Californians knowledge about what info is sold and the power to say no to such sales. History shows these laws were reactions trying to stuff the evolving genie of technology back into the bottle. Were they successful? To an extent, maybe. These days, privacy policies are clearer, opt-outs more common. Yet cookie consent banners might as well be digital wallpaper for all the attention they get. It boils down to this: laws evolve, but do habits actually change? Is our data really safer or just better papered over? As for the Silicon Sleuth's track records, history isn't done writing their story, not by a long shot.
Oh, what a twisted web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Or in tech terms, click agree without reading.
Nicely put, Simon. Clicking agree is almost muscle memory at this point. But let's rewind the tape a bit. This isn't just about users sleepwalking through consent forms. It's tech giants banking on that behavior. Way back, creators of early web services probably weren't plotting diabolical data heists. Yet as user numbers skyrocketed, data became digital gold, too lucrative to ignore. Bet they didn't see becoming inadvertent privacy pirates on the horizon. Tech giants wove an intricate web indeed, and it wasn't long before people's info was threading through uncontrollable cyberspace mazes. When scandals hit, it felt like those "oops, we've updated our privacy policy" emails were less about safeguarding us and more about legal cover-ups. Sure, we've got sturdier webs now with GDPR and CCPA. I'll give them that. But for every new safeguard introduced, there seems to be another data mine waiting to explode. Companies comply publicly, while sometimes finding loopholes privately. It leaves you wondering if we're really any safer, or if it's just fancier footwork in the ongoing privacy dance. Now take AI into account, tech that predicts your next move before even you know it. The Silicon Sleuths have tools that would make old-school spies blush. As much as policies aim to rein things in, tech moves at warp speed. Is legislation even keeping pace? We need vigilance, not only from regulators but from users too. Critical thinking each time we confront that agree button. Are we trading too much convenience for privacy? Maybe the real twist in this web is that technology can provide protections as powerful as the threats it poses, if wielded rightly. It's a tug of war between innovation and intrusion, with history watching keenly.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? In the grand scheme of clicks and swipes, are we just pawns in the Silicon Sleuth's chess game, or can we checkmate our way back to privacy?
It's a game of strategy, no doubt. But are we pawns? That's the real question. Checkmate might be a long shot, yet there's some power in our moves. Let's break it down. Historically, companies hoarded data like dragons with gold, not just because they could, but because we let them, rarely questioning where and why our personal info was going. But scandals and breaches shook users from that apathy. Suddenly, protecting one's digital footprint wasn't just for the paranoid. Public outcry led to those checkmate-type laws we talked about, GDPR, CCPA, and their global kin. Now, here's where our gaming board gets interesting. Tech giants are forced to play by new rules, sure, but their next moves get sneakier, subtler. They may frame tools or features as enhanced security or improved user experience, while barely disguising their data grabs. Where do we stand? We're becoming savvier, reading up on encryption, using privacy-focused services, heck, even taking legal action when required. We influence market trends. Look at how backlash has nudged platforms to offer more privacy settings. Can we ever fully reclaim our privacy? Tough to say. But history books will show that as technology's complexity grew, so did user fortitude and sophistication. It's not quite a checkmate. It's an ongoing series of moves and countermoves between consumers and the Silicon Sleuths. Each policy update, each innovation, reshuffling the chessboard of cyberspace.
In this high-stakes game, guys, remember, your data's the crown jewel. Don't hand it over like last night's leftover pizza. Be the king of your digital kingdom. Wear that cybersecurity crown with pride.
Absolutely, Simon. Guard your data like it's the last slice of pizza at a party. Everyone wants it, but only you decide who gets a bite. And when it comes to privacy policies, reading them is like reading terms and conditions in different languages. You think you know what you agreed to until one day You find out you accidentally promised your firstborn to a tech giant for free email service. Wear that cybersecurity crown and rule wisely. Less yes-clicking, more scepter-wielding vigilance.
You know, Joe, it's wild. Today's vigilance is tomorrow's digital survival kit. I mean, who knows what sort of data-dealing shenanigans we might uncover next on our Silicon Sleuth saga.
Speaking of data-dealing shenanigans, it's like every time you sign up for a new app or service, you're faced with the war and peace of digital documents, those terms of service agreements. I mean, they could hide a clause in there declaring the user owes them their pet goldfish, and we'd unknowingly click, I agree. Can anyone actually get through these comically complex contracts without dozing off?
Right, comical is one word for it, Joe. Another might be bonkers. You're spot on about those agreements. Ever try reading one out loud? By the time you finish, your beard's longer and your coffee's gone cold, hypothetically, of course. And they always throw in words like hereinbefore or notwithstanding every 2 sentences. Like, seriously, if someone used those words in real life, you'd think they time-traveled from the 1800s. It's less terms of service and more terms of sorcery. I bet even wizards couldn't decode it all on the first try.
Oh, it's a spellbinding spectacle for sure. These terms of sorcery double as snooze-inducing spells. Fact is, if you tallied all the hours spent by users worldwide trying to decipher that legalese, we'd probably have time to solve some of humanity's biggest mysteries, like why we still can't find matching socks after laundry day. And it's not just the time sink, it's the sheer absurdity of what's tucked inside. Buried under gigabytes of legal jargon could be bizarre gems, like agreeing your data might be shared with unspecified partners, or that by signing up, you're consenting to let your anonymized info be used in ways you'd need a Rosetta Stone for tech terms to understand. In real life, nobody talks like they've swallowed a legal textbook. Companies going barmy with these documents is like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Overkill, and quite the jaw-dropper when you really consider what we're nonchalantly nodding along to. It's less an agreement, more a wild goose chase through the dense forest of legalese landia.
For sure, Joe. But what do you think would happen if, let's say, everyone actually read every word of those terms of sorcery and understood them? Would companies still put in all the crazy stuff, or would they have to clean up their act?
That's the million-dollar question, huh? If every user turned into a legal eagle overnight and scrutinized every line, you think these tech titans would stick to their cryptic guns or switch gears? Imagine the uproar if people truly grasped every clause. Social media might just implode with the collective, "We signed up for what?" The pressure could force companies to simplify and clarify. We'd see real change, or maybe witness the birth of an even sneakier beast. What do you reckon, Simon? Would the Silicon Sleuths ditch the doublespeak for plain speak, or just find new puzzles for us?
Oh, Joe, plain speak from Silicon Sleuths? That's like expecting a cat to walk on a leash. It might happen, but I wouldn't bet my lunch money on it. Here's the deal. Clear language doesn't leave much room for creative interpretation or sneaky data grabs. Now, does it? They'd need new magic tricks, and let's be real, they're not going to cut back on the data feast. It's their bread and butter. The more likely story? They'll find brand spanking new riddles to wrap up those terms tighter than a burrito with too much stuffing. It could turn into a Wild West show of who can sound the most sincere while still slipping in the old razzle-dazzle to keep us clicking I agree faster than we can say, "What the heck did I just sign up for?"
You're bang on, Simon. Imagine trusting your cat with a leash simply doesn't compute. The thought of plain speak from these tech wizards feels like a hopeful daydream. It's downright exasperating, you know? Here we are, trying to keep up with the ways our data is used or abused, wishing for some transparency, dreaming of an internet where common sense trumps convoluted clauses. Trouble is, just as we get savvy to their tricks, they've already cooked up a dozen new ones. And while we laugh about it, there's a real frustration brewing beneath. Every click, every swipe, it all adds up, chipping away at what little privacy we have left. There's got to be a line in the sand somewhere. Or maybe that line's so buried in terms and conditions, we've already crossed it without knowing.
Totally, Joe. Sometimes it feels like we're in over our heads, doesn't it? All this talk about data, it's not just numbers and names, it's people's lives. When I think of my own privacy getting passed around like a deck of cards, well, it gets me kind of heated. I mean, we all have that moment of what am I signing away? Then you look at your phone thinking about every app on there. It's enough to make anyone paranoid. It's personal. What was meant to connect us, bring us joy, sometimes feels like it's doing the opposite, spinning us in circles with nowhere to hide. The joke's funny until it hits too close to home, huh?
Absolutely. We jest because it's better than boiling over, but you're spot on. It gets personal, and that's no joke. The dizzying spin of privacy policies can feel like a breach of trust in our own homes. Jokes aside, when does the push for transparency become less about chuckles and more about change? Because let's face it, between the laughs are real concerns begging for daylight, and we're all itching for a breath of fresh air in this maze of terms and conditions. What's your take, folks? Where do we draw the line between safety and surrender in our digital domains?
It's the age-old tug of war between wanting cool tech at our fingertips and not wanting to be an open book, right? So, pivoting a bit, but staying on track with privacy, how about those privacy pioneers who are shaking things up? We're talking about crafting a new deal, a fair play framework for how businesses handle our data ethically. Because let's face it, transparency shouldn't be just a buzzword, and personal rights can't keep playing second fiddle to business interests. We need rules of the game that everyone plays by. But here's the techno twist. We've got blockchain, quantum computing, AI, big brain stuff. These aren't just shiny toys. They could be the guardians at the gate, keeping our digital lives safe. I'm thinking, Joe, are these high-tech sentinels going to forge us a shiny armor against data misuse, or are we looking at yet another round of hide-and-seek with our info?
High-tech guardians sound fantastic in theory, but here's the thing. Will they really serve the public interest or just become another shiny toolkit for data exploitation? I mean, blockchain is touted as this incorruptible digital ledger, great potential for privacy and security. Yet, isn't it ironic how most folks don't fully grasp it? AI could revolutionize consent mechanisms, making them smarter, but who's to say it won't end up being a wolf in sheep's clothing, outsmarting us instead? What's to prevent quantum computing from cracking open every bit of encrypted data we thought was safe? Those pioneers you're talking about, Simon, they've got their work cut out for them. And honestly, tech alone won't fix this mess. It takes earnest policymaking and a shift in corporate ethics. Otherwise, these guardians might just be the newest mercenaries hired by the highest bidder. Real change? That requires more than tech. It demands a collective call for rights-respecting practices, with or without Silicon Sleuth's seal of approval.
That's it, Joe. You've hit the nail on the head. Tech's just a tool, like a hammer. It can build us a shelter or whack us on the thumb, depending on who's swinging it. And until everyone agrees not to aim for our thumbs, it's going to be one heck of a ride.
You're right about the rough ride, Simon. Speaking of innovative swings, let's steer this hammer towards something constructive. We've been nattering about personal data and tech. Well, that's basically the foundation stones of smart cities, isn't it? Cities infused with technology to revolutionize our living spaces, streamline transportation, ramp up sanitation, optimize energy use. All of this interconnectedness can turn urban sprawls into finely tuned symphonies. Look at places like Singapore or Barcelona. They're already rolling out the red carpet for a future where city life is more than bearable. It's exceptional. But hang on a sec. Along with all these upgrades come questions. Who controls the data collected from public services? Is our privacy taking another hit in these high-tech havens? Utopia's got its price tag. A smart city needs to be clever enough not only to improve codes and concrete, but also ensure it doesn't leave its citizens behind, privacy included.
All right, Joe, smart cities, shiny on the surface, but let's dig into the dirt. Barcelona, Singapore, fancy places with their techie toys, sure. But what about the folks living there? Are they just data points now? Every step tracked, every bus ride logged. And hey, who said everyone's jazzed about living in a high-tech fishbowl? Where's the line where smart becomes too smart for its own good? We're not all aiming to live in a Blade Runner sequel, are we? It's cool until your trash can starts judging your diet based on garbage content. Utopia, maybe for some, but we need to look at this through the cracked lenses of reality. Revolutions are loud, messy. They're not these smooth transitions where everyone holds hands singing Kumbaya. Smart cities have got to consider Jane and John Doe, who might just want to toss their pizza box without getting a health notification from Big Brother City Central.
Ah, the high-stakes dance of progress versus intrusion. There's nothing like the thought of your trash can tattling on you to make smart cities seem less shining, more shady. It paints an absurd picture, but it's deeply rooted in real concerns about overreaching tech, smart city or not. No one signed up to live in a surveillance reality show.
Smart cities could be cool, Joe, but I'm not loving the idea of my fridge joining in on the neighborhood gossip, whispering about my midnight snack habits to some city server.
Totally, Simon. Sure, smart city benefits are a no-brainer. Efficient public transport that reduces waiting times, saving energy with streetlights that dim when no one's around. It's the sort of Jetsons future we dreamed about. Yet this digital tapestry could become too intimate. We need safeguards that ensure our at-home snack raids stay off the record. The solution? Smart policies for smart cities. Data needs anonymizing, citizens require opt-outs, and transparency has to go both ways. Otherwise, these urban utopias might start feeling a tad dystopian. If we want smart cities that truly revolutionize living, they have to empower residents without eroding privacy.
Joe, this talk of smart cities reminds me of that time my old man decided he'd automate our house back in the day. He was all hyped up about turning our humble abode into a mini smart city prototype. Picture this: clapper lights, a fridge alarm for when we left it open, and even a DIY irrigation system for Mom's garden that nearly turned it into a swimming pool. Anyway, one night, everything just started going off at once. The sprinklers, the lights, fridge beeping like R2-D2 having a meltdown. I swear it was like living inside a pinball machine. It took us days to reset the chaos. So, getting back to creating these urban wonderlands, balance is key, right? We need the smarts, but not so much that life starts feeling like a malfunctioning house of the future. A city that cares too much can end up just driving everyone bonkers. Keep it helpful, not heavy-handed. That's where the magic lies.
Balancing act, indeed. Your dad was onto something, minus the near Waterworld experience. Smart cities sound glitzy, but without a careful hand, they can become an automated nightmare. A city's brain should work like the best personal assistant. Unobtrusive yet indispensable, not a bumbling babysitter. Keep the tech visible enough to make our lives easier, but invisible enough to let spontaneity thrive. And for crying out loud, avoid turning neighborhoods into a circus of beeps and alarms that give everyone the heebie-jeebies. Smart shouldn't suffocate, it should subtly support. After all, we want to upgrade urban living, not live in perpetual beta testing. I'm looking at you, developers and city planners. Take notes, will ya?
Absolutely, Joe. It's like when you upgrade your phone, it should still feel like yours, just better. A city's upgrade has got to keep the human element in the equation. We want tech to blend into our streets, not hijack them. If I stroll through a park, I don't need sensors telling me how to enjoy the trees. And if I'm late for a bus, maybe I don't want the city pinging my smartwatch to run faster. There's something about the unexpected, the unscripted, that keeps life flavorful. We can't let that get lost in the wires and waves of a smart city. Keep it cool, keep it clever, but most importantly, keep it human.
Keeping it human. That's the linchpin. Here's the deal. Smart city tech is brilliant for managing resources efficiently. Think energy distribution that matches usage patterns, slashing waste, or public services that adapt to real-time demand. Fewer lines, less frustration. But let's never forget, cities are organic, pulsing with culture and random encounters that define our human experience. Layer in tech to tackle the mundane, sure, but safeguard those serendipitous moments that make city life rich and textured. The best urban utopia keeps the community at its core, enhancing daily life without scripting it, enabling both society and the individual to flourish. Some extra food for thought. Crucial infrastructure like roads and utilities get a boost from smart tech, but let's also advance community spaces. places where people connect face to face, not just through screens. After all, the heart of a city beats strongest where its people gather, laugh, debate, and live out loud together.
Hey there, fresh ears. If you're just jumping in, we've been gabbing about smart cities and how they're jazzing up our urban digs with tech. We're talking streetlights that wink at you when you pass and buses that roll up just as you get to the stop, like magic. But don't fret, we haven't forgotten the human touch. Picture a city that's a big buddy. It knows what you need without getting all nosy. Smart, sure, but with enough wiggle room so you can still dance in the park or chuckle with the neighbor without feeling like Big Brother's watching. So stick with us as we keep diving into this digital dreamland where convenience doesn't kick privacy to the curb.
Before we jump on the smart city bandwagon, let's pump the brakes for a hot minute. Say the streetlights and buses are all synced up. Cool. But smart isn't always savvy. Sometimes it's just plain sassy. The chase for the ultimate convenience can overshoot, turning into an overbearing digital nanny. And what about local businesses and communities? The cheese shop owner or the corner bookstore might not want their daily bread to rely on algorithmic whims. We have to question if smarter also means better for the community spirit, or if we're paving over the soul of our cities with sophisticated sensors. Does upgrading mean uprooting what gives neighborhoods their unique flavor? A dose of skeptical seasoning helps ensure smart doesn't become a byword for sanitized. Our urban utopia mustn't be coldly calculated. Let's strive for smart without stripping away the messy parts that make cities truly vibrant and human.
True, Joe. We can't let smart cities turn into smarty pants cities. Imagine living in a place that's so on top of everything, it sends you a fine for laughing too loud because you're disturbing the peace or something. Who wants to live in a city that's got to stick up its motherboard?
Hey, fresh listeners. You're riding the airwaves with Joe and Simon on the infinite chatter of city life. We just hashed out the big dream of smart cities. Imagine streetlights that do a timid tango with your footsteps and buses that slide into the stop just as you waltz up. We're dreaming big, but keeping our feet planted in the messy, glorious human soil of reality. Because while a high-tech town can dial up convenience, it's got to keep its heart beating to the rhythm of real life. No cold metal tick. A city should be like your favorite jacket, smart enough to button up against the chill, but still leave space for spontaneous dance moves. Stay tuned for more banter as we unravel the digital seams and see if smart cities fit all sizes or if they're just fancy straitjackets in disguise.
So, while we've tossed around some serious tech confetti today about these smart city shindigs, I say let's not forget to keep the urban in utopia urban. It's all about marrying the messiness of daily life with the sleekness of tech without ending up at a wedding where no one wants to dance. What'll be the next step? Let's see next time.
Hey, Infinite Crew, as we cruise out of the smart city landscape, we'll be steering into a new crossroad next episode: traffic lights and privacy rights. It's going to take us through the tight turns of public surveillance tech versus the open highways of our privacy rights. It's about threading that needle. How much Big Brother do we invite to our cities before it gets too personal? Civil liberties are on one end, security surveilling on the other. We'll explore how different spots around the globe are juggling these two juggernauts. So make sure you circle back here at 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow for more of our deep dive. It's one ride you don't want to miss. Until then, keep it real and stay tuned. Thanks for listening, folks.